Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to Faraja TV yet again. My name is Roger Studiabwe, and today we are talking about a number of issues that are happening around us, but particularly it's a conversation on climate change. Today, our guest is Walter Osigai. He's going to be introducing himself in a little while. But just to give you an introduction about this whole conversation, it happens every single Tuesday at 5 p.m. Be able to move to the Faraja TV YouTube channel. You'll be finding these conversations, and would appreciate if you just send a comment or have a question. You put it down there so we can check it out later on. Maybe we can come back and look at some of those issues that you raise and then see if we can address them. Many of the guests that I host here are those who are particularly in those areas of the topical discussions. And today the discussion is going to be around climate change. I'm going to look at where we are as a country, but also look at the general perspective, the global perspective. Walter Sigai is one who's particularly a climate change activist, but also one who has been a part of many of the conversations that have shaped the conversation about climate change and moving forward, both at the country level, but also at the international level. So I'm going to invite Mr. Walter, introduce yourself just a little bit for our viewers who are joining us for the very first time today, to understand, first of all, who you are, what do you do, for example, and then we'll get right into the conversation at that.
Hello, very good morning, everyone. My name is Osigai Walter Etepesit. I'm the Climate, Environment and Energy Thematic Lead of the Youth Founding Board. I am also the CEO of Walton Africa Waste Management Company and also the co-founder and programs director of Marafiki United Green Youth Initiative, Uganda. My work is mainly to mobilize young people from Uganda and to empower them to take climate action through different initiatives that they are involved in, but also bringing and calling all other stakeholders to come on board to support young people as they fight for climate action.
You like talk so much about young people and supporting them and all of this, and I noticed that you have two initiatives, or at least two. Might be having a number of the others in the background, and we'll get back just a little bit about that later. So I also note that you are a member of the Youth Sounding Board for the EU, and you are the thematic lead on climate change and environment. So just to paint a picture, many of the people who are joining us, some may not necessarily know the whole conversation, the whole idea of first, what is climate change? That has been a thing that goes around. And, a lot of people don't actually have the deeper knowledge of what climate change is. What does it mean for an ordinary Ugandan, for young people out there who does not know what this means? Why should they care? Why should they be worried about climate change? What does that mean? Why should I be worried every single day that climate change is happening and I need to be able to do something about it? Just if you could paint a picture for us.
Okay, thank you so much. Climate change is mainly the change in the shifts in weather patterns that we're experiencing every day in our societies. And this is very evident. Climate change, we mostly see it in forms of floods, increase in temperatures, increase in landslides and etc., but mostly man-made catastrophes that are happening to us in our daily communities. We can see that there is increase in rainfall that is bringing about floods. There is increase in the temperatures that we are facing right now in Uganda, the heat waves that we are facing not only in Africa but also in Europe. We are seeing heat waves, we are seeing bushfires in North America and also Central America. And that's why climate change is a topic that is really something that is most talked about right now. And so climate change actually is a public health issue currently because it is one of the biggest threats that we have in our century right now that we are facing. And mostly we young people are facing the burden of our elders, what our elders brought about in the past, in the Industrial Revolution, the use of fossil fuels and the dependence of the earth, climate-sensitive resources. And that's why we young people right now, we are facing the burden of this climate change that is coming in effects of the past. And so climate change is really something important that we young people need to tackle right now and come up with solutions because the future is ours. and we want to protect the future generations that are coming after us.
And you do mention that this is something that is likely to be around for a little while, or has been at least. But we also see that many of the countries, including Uganda itself, seem to not be there yet, or even will be there in the near future. We still have fossil fuels. In Uganda, we have an impending project. The war with Ukraine and Russia and whatnot has had a lot of countries fall back to using fossil fuels because energy was sort of the consumption, the distribution passages were sort of blocked by the war and all of these things. How do you look at what do we have in the meantime, as we are fighting climate change and we still have these things? How do we live, or how do we reduce on the impacts and the effects of climate change to be able to have healthy livelihoods, if you must say, but also to set a trend that makes the future a little better than it is now?
First of all, I want to say that Africa as a continent, we are contributing less than 4% greenhouse gases. And that's why we as Africa, the countries, we are prioritizing right now adaptation as a means. But also, it still doesn't change the fact that Uganda is one of the most affected global south countries when it comes to climate change. And we are all witnessing this in different regions of the country. But for as a country right now, as an African country, as Uganda, we need to focus on adaptation, which is readjusting our ways of living and readjusting basically our ways of living, readjusting how we use, deplete, and depend on climate sensitive resources such as forests and also energy and also fossil fuels. But this discussion is really controversial because we, as Africa, we contribute less than 4% greenhouse emissions. And that's why even people like the African Group of Negotiations, when they go to conference of parties, they are mainly focusing on adaptation, whereby we want finances to really readjust and enable people to sustain and live with these impacts, and also be able to cope and also live with this impact in societies. But how are we going to do that? We are going to do that through adapting climate smart ways, such as climate smart agriculture, empowering our farmers, and also empowering young people to take on climate action in forms such as tree planting, in forms such as giving them green skills, in forms such as educating them and raising their awareness on climate change. We understand also that very many and some of the Ugandans also don't understand what climate change is. So it will be very important for first to let Ugandans become aware what is climate change, and mostly people in the local communities, such as the indigenous communities, like in Karamoja, in the upper country. Most of them don't understand climate change, but they are facing these impacts in their society. So it's really important for us to take and educate them on climate change, and also be able to put in and push this climate culture in our education system to be able to create change makers in our young people, so that by the time these young children grow up, they've been knowing what to do and they've been knowing how to fight the impacts of climate change.
I have heard some people talk about the idea of climate education, something like that, where you have to get I don't know if it was about sort of a change in the curriculum to include education such as that, because it's very instrumental. But I do not know, for some of us who may not necessarily be following up, is there a process? Is there hope that might be an idea? So if, for example, you have the pupil, because those are the young ones, means it begins from the ground up, that if you have students from primary, they understand what climate change is, what those environmental issues are altogether, resources such as fossil fuels and what they pose to the environment. If you look at all of that, do you think that's an approach that we can take, or is there any progress in that regard as a country?
First of all, I want to say that we as Uganda, we are progressing, because currently we have a bill that was passed in 2021, a bill on climate change. And that bill talks about including climate education in the curricula, and etc., skilling young people in vocational institutes and higher institutes of learning. But what we need to do now as a country, we need to really implement and see that we implement that bill and implement all those things that we came up with in that bill, such as climate education, agricultural. So we really need to empower teachers with this information. First of all, we need to empower teachers with climate materials, such as books, and also be able to first train the teachers so they can be able to educate these young children. And so we really have something in place for climate education and to raise awareness for the young people in Uganda. But all we need is just implementation and also support from the government in form of resources, and also empowering these people who are in charge of local resources in the district level, and also the agricultural extension officers who are able to build the capacities of local farmers in the grassroots. And so it's all about supporting those people in the grassroots, the teachers, the agricultural extension officers, the natural resources officers in the districts, and also the local leaders in the districts.
You did talk about adaptation as one of the ways that we can sort of cope with existing conditions and effects of climate change. The adaptation, first of all, what we need to, in the general outlook, may not be necessarily very technical, just to understand what does adaptation look like? Where do we begin from as a country? Because from what it is, adaptation maybe means that the conditions that we have are going to probably be around for a little longer. And we need to find a way to live with them, but sort of mitigate, reduce on how much effects we get from it. So what maybe do we need for us to be able to adapt at the basic level, at least? Because if you notice, as our followers might know, over 70% of the population of Uganda lives in the countryside. Now, those are people whose livelihoods depend on the natural, sources of food. They grow food. Those who depend on seasons, if it doesn't rain, they won't have food. In that backdrop, how do we see that, make it a point that adaptation does work for the people, but also what do we need to adapt, just to begin there?
First of all, adaptation are actions that we young people or community people are taking in order to readjust according to the climate catastrophes or the climate impacts. We are simply readjusting our lifestyles and being able to adapt to the changing means of society, to the changing things that are happening, to the changing impacts that are caused by climate change. And so for us to adapt in our community, it means that we are coming up with different mechanisms to empower ourselves against these climate catastrophes. We are not mainly eliminating the whole problem, such as reducing greenhouse gases, but we are living with a problem. So how are we going to live with the problem? Let me give an example. People who are living in the mountainous areas, they have a problem of landslides or mudslides,
Like the ones in Hudud.
A means of adaptation that they can come up with is growing trees. When they grow these trees are able to reduce these landslides. Another means that they can use is relocate themselves to a better place, a lowland area where they're able to grow and where they're able to live peacefully. Another means of adaptation is basically empowering our local farmers with climate smart practices and skills, and also not only practices but also equipment and resources to ensure that they can be able to fight desertification and also the impacts of drought in the dry season, where they're able to have water. Basically, adaptation in that regard is basically providing them with water, enough water resources, and also providing them with better fertilizers, providing them also with capacity building. And so we are living with a problem, but we are finding solutions to cope with the problem. And so that is basically adaptation in the layman's regard.
So if as a country where we stand, in especially looking at that in that regard, how does it as a country now collectively? Because when the adaptation we talk about now, we're looking at maybe individually in the countrysides. So as a country, do we have some sort of policy? Do we have like direction that we have that is adaptation based, that you know what, as a country we may not have the capacity to fight climate change and survive it, but we're going to be adapting, and this is how we're going to do. Do we have like any of that? What does that? Where do we stand as a country, just in that regard?
First of all, Uganda as a country, we have very good policies in place. We have very good laws.
Yeah.
We have documentation such
Yeah,
as
that reputation.
national adaptation plans for Uganda.
Yeah.
We also have the national determined contributions of 2021. And then recently, Uganda again submitted their national determined contributions to the UNFCCC. And so we have all these plans in documents. So the only thing that is remaining for Uganda is implementation. We need to really work on our implementation and also to make sure that we transform these things from words to action, from documents to action at the local level mostly, and mostly for the local farmers who are dependent on agriculture to generate income to support their families at the local levels. And so as a country, we really have policies, we have documentations, national adaptation plans, we have full departments that are responsible for adaptation at the Ministry of Water, that is the climate change department. We also have the climate change finance unit at the Ministry of Finance. We also have the climate and environment committee at Parliament. So we really need to really change these words to action as a country. How are we going to do this? As I've said in the past, we need to empower our people at the local grassroots levels. But who are these people? These are the extension workers, agricultural extension workers. These are the resources officers at the district level. These are the local farmers, but also having different capacity building workshops and opportunities for these people, but not forgetting the youth, of course, who are also mainly dependent on agriculture to survive. And so we really just need to transform these things into action.
Yeah. And part of the transformation, you mentioned the Environment and Climate Change Committees in Parliament. And well, that's like a body of technocrats who sort of understand this and that. Do you feel like there's a connection between the people? Because if you notice, like, people who are largely affected are those in the countryside, like you mentioned. You have those extension officers, you have those like local government people are the ones who are directly in touch with these people. But is it, why don't these knowledges get down? Is it just a disconnect between these bodies, like the bodies of parliament, and then the local government, and trickle to the farmers and what's not in the countrysides? Like, knowledge seems to be there. Like you said, we have the laws, we have the policies, we have all of these documents. What's standing in the way of all of this implementation?
I think for me, basically, what is missing is the implementation plan and also the action plans, and how are we going to, and also being able to provide time limits for when we are going to achieve these some of these goals that we want, such as adaptation in the local communities. I think that is what we lack. We also lack commitment from these leaders and also from these committees and officials and what. And so one of the issues that they keep talking about is lack of resources, lack of what. But we can use whatever little resources that we have right now to be able to create an impact. One thing that we just need is to empower these people through these extension officers that I've talked about. But also one thing that I've discovered is that there is a wide gap between some of these committees I'm talking about and the young people. Most of them want to do things in silos, and most of them want to do things with government, or let me say district, local council in the district. But most times they eliminate young people in this chain. They don't know that young people are the ones with the most energy, the most better place to implement these things at the local level. They are the ones who have a lot of energy, but most times the young people are removed from the chain, and so it's very hard to implement some of these things without the young people. And so that's why you can see that we have most of the things, and But the old people cannot do them.
Mhm.
It's us, the young people, who are able to help the old people in the grassroots level to implement some of these things. So I believe that young people should be more included in some of these discussions, and also the government should work with the young people in the districts. They should work with the youth leaders in the districts to ensure, because these youth leaders are the ones who are more connected to these young people, are the ones who these people, young people, mostly believe in. So I believe government first, we need to empower young people first of all, and we also need to have a time frame when we need to achieve these things. Because if we don't have a time frame, we shall continue saying 2030, 2050, what, blah, blah. We shall continue saying that we have the plans in place, but we don't have the implementation uh, plan. We don't have the morale. We don't have the commitment to achieve some of the things, and we keep complaining of resources. We keep complaining of lack of funds, and yet we as a country, we can begin with what we have. Thank you.
I speaking of youth leaders, I am a youth chairperson for subcontinent, but I've rarely, very rarely, if at all anyway, been contacted at any one point and by maybe the local government to say, you know what, we have this and that program, except for parish development model, which, okay, I will not get into that. But so there's even at the local level, at the local government, there's so much detachment between the grand person and that body. And meanwhile, those are the closest to the people and who understand the issues of people. But anyway, so to move to this whole conversation, even at the national level, it also feeds into the global perspective and the global process and approaches of trying to fight this whole problem as it is. Because again, like you said in the beginning, Uganda probably contributes less than 4% to the global greenhouse gas emissions. But yet the suffering, we take equal measure, literally, if not more than we deserve. So how you attended the Conference of Parties 28, the one that was in Dubai. First, in this regard, what were the ideas that you think were on point, or what do you think it missed out that we need to capitalize on? Maybe if we move to COP29 or COP30, or I don't know if we move to 30 or 30 something. What is it? First of all, just about COP. What was standing out in regard to climate change in the global perspective?
Thank you. First of all, Conference of Parties, which is commonly known as COP, is an annual event that is convened by the United Nations to bring different parties from all countries to discuss and also to forge ways for climate change, to come up with solutions for climate change, come up with plans, and also to contribute to the discussions surrounding around climate change in the globe. But specifically, we as a country, as Uganda, being part of the African Union, at COP, we see that the African, but basically, let me first talk about the African. We have the African group of negotiators who go to COP on behalf of the African Union to negotiate on behalf of the African countries. But we also, as a country, we also send our delegations to COP, Conference of Parties, to these places, delegations from the Ministry of Water and Energy, Ministry of Water and Environment. Some are from the Ministry of Energy, some are from Parliament. And so when we go to this Conference of Parties, we go there because we have our own goals and objectives. That's why we are going there.
Yes.
We are going there specifically for certain things. We are not going there for each and everything, because at COP, each and everything is discussed relating to climate change. We have gender, agriculture, adaptation, mitigation, just transition, climate justice. But we as a country, we are specifically going there for specific things. Now a country like Uganda that was focusing mainly on smart energy, clean energy, and also they're focusing on adaptation mostly, and also climate finance, to be able to support and also to be able to get more funds and finance to tackle climate change in Uganda, and also be able to partner with other organizations that can be able to come to Uganda and also be able to extend clean energy services in the country. And so at COP, one of the deals that the Ministry of Energy successfully signed up in at COP. One of the partners, they signed one of the deals to extend clean energy in Uganda and also to extend the access to electricity in Uganda. And I think they signed with one of the French companies that agreement. And so one of the other things that we as a country was focusing on was adaptation, climate adaptation, mainly to support the people at the grassroots to be able to cope with these climate change issues. And so at COP, really there are so many discussions that happen. And so one of the discussions was about the just transition. And one of the things that I'm happy about, that this was the very first COP that all countries, the COP presidency agreed on the issue of just transition, to transition away from the dependence of fossil fuels to clean energy. But even when they talked about this just transition, COP is mainly an avenue, and the climate discussions is really, I can say that it's a very complex political system that is surrounding the climate discussion right now. Because even when they talk about the just transition, but there is no really clear plan of really implementing this transition plan. Because we see a country such as the UAE, one of the countries that is extracting and mainly dependent on fossil fuels, that is oil, is able to host the COP.
That is hosting COP.
And most of these fossil fuel companies, such as the oil companies like Shell, Exxon, are influencing most of the decisions that happen at COP. And also the COP president was also an oil chief. He's an oil chief of the national oil company of UAE, that is United Arab Emirates. And so the whole discussions are just controversial. Even when we talk about just transitioning to clean energy away from fossil fuels, we still have there is no clear direction how we're going to implement it, because we are really talking about it, but how are we going to tell United Arab Emirates that stop extracting oil that is really that they used to run their economy, that they used to develop their country? How are you going to tell a country like Nigeria or what stop getting this oil? It is contributing to their what? To their global national revenue. And so we as Africa, we are really saying that let us focus on adaptation, because first of all, we contribute less than 4% greenhouse emissions. And so we should not be dragged into that discussion of greenhouse gases, because even if we are affected the most,
how can we avoid it? Because the effects come to all of us in information.
The effects come to all of us. So what we really, as growing economies, as economies that are still developing countries, what we need to focus right now is to adapt to climate, and also be able to get more climate finance from the institutions such as the World Bank, such as we also be able to tap from the loss and damage funds that were passed at COP, and also be able to benefit from the Green Climate Fund, and etc. All those things. And so the issue of ending fossil fuel use in Africa is really controversial, because now a country like Uganda, we have not even started extracting our oil,
and we are moving into that.
And we are moving into discussions for green transition. So we as a country are really now trying just to say, let us now focus on adaptation, because when we talk about mitigation, it will now be controversial, because we are still going to extract this oil and we are going to be emitting greenhouse gases. And so it's really, now I can say now it's now upon the political leaders to decide on what they want, because if we talk about ending the dependence on fossil fuels, we as a country have not even extracted the oil. We have not even done any step. And we are looking at this oil to boost our economy. We are saying that when we get this oil, it will develop the country, etc., etc. So it's really controversial. And so at this point, we as a country, they were really focusing mainly on climate adaptation at COP, and also be able to demand for climate justice in form of course climate finance, to be able to hold these global north countries accountable for their greenhouse emissions,
Yeah.
and also be able to demand for more finances from them, but also finances in a just and equitable way. Not for us to get finances from a very bureaucratic system such as the World Bank. They should be able to make this system very simple for countries to access this finance.
So if I hear you well, what you mean is if we, for example, move to COP29 this year, our focus should be on adaptation. Should that be do you think that's the direction we need to take? Like, if we understand the importance of, for example, green energy transition to clean energy and renewable energy and all of this, but maybe we are not there quite yet, and we need to first see how do we live in the moment and then to move forward to see how renewable energy transition happens. Is that what you mean?
So what I'm trying actually to mean is that we as a country we should focus on green growth. Even if Uganda is, let's say, exploring oil, it should not change the fact that we should be able to develop these technologies and be able to finance these technologies that are encouraging green growth in the country. We should be able also to encourage and also to support green skilling programs for young people, and also be able to see that we are implementing all the things at the same time, because we cannot say that we can only have adaptation alone and also leave out climate mitigation. We need all of them at the same time. But even if we are going to mine our oil and what, we need these things. We need to encourage these things, all these technologies and etc. innovations in the country, to make sure that even if this oil or what we stop using it, depending it in the future, we can still move forward with the in place already developed technologies and green programs that we have developed in our country. And mostly some of these green programs or green growth, it could be in solar technology, it could be really mainly smart energy. So we should, and some of these things, the young people in Uganda are already doing them. Some are developing mini grids to provide electricity. Some are what. So we should really support these people. We should really support these young people, support these companies or organizations that are doing these things. It's not that we should only focus on adaptation. We should really support each and everything so that we can be able to move in the right direction.
Yeah, the youths are actually doing that stuff. At the EU Uganda Business Forum, I met a young man, young, quite in our age, who they have a company that does those off-grid sort of like solar panels and what's not, and they're doing very good stuff. He was telling me, showing their profile they've done in Zimbabwe, I think in Zambia as well, I think also in Kenya, something like that. So youths are actually doing these things if we would only support them, but also add on their capacity. But if you're looking at this whole conversation and how it stands and where we are looking, and globally but also nationally, how do you see the youths themselves playing a role in this transition? I understand where you say that we are very likely going to extract our oil anyway. That goes without saying. But you also, I understand here you when you say that we need to move with a posture that encourages alternative ways. That as much as this is happening, we need to also look on what other ways do we need to move to moving forward. So what is the role of the youth in this whole process? Because we also wanted to understand the whole constituency of people and what each one of them is playing, what their role is. So what do you think youth should be doing in this regard?
First of all, youth, let me say, I don't want to say youth, I just want to say young people. 75% of the population of Uganda. And so young people are drivers of change, first of all, because they are the ones that are very many in number. So these young people can actually be the ambassadors in their community of climate action. And so these young people actually will be able to, when empowered, these young people will be able to empower also their colleagues at the grassroots levels. But when empowered, but when availed the necessary resources, these young people can be able to empower their colleagues at the grassroots level, at the local level, And so young people are really important people in this climate action implementation objectives and goals, because we see young people really being some of the most um, they are mostly, we see that young people are involved in all the sectors that we have in Uganda. Young people are involved in all different sectors, such as agriculture. In the private sector, you find young people. In the civil society sector, you find young people. In the health sector, you find young people. And so really, young people, using young people as the change actors and the change makers in their communities to implement some of these projects is the best way to go, because they make up the most population. And so you cannot eliminate them. And secondly, they are the people who are going to be there several years after now. They are the generations that are going to be there after now. And so it's very key to build the capacities of these young people to ensure that they can also be able to train, educate the others on climate action, not only just education, but also implementing some of these climate action programs in adaptation, mitigation, clean energy, and also being able to see that they're involved in the just transition, as some of those examples we've talked about. In that we are seeing already young people already in the just transition phase. They're already implementing some of these just transition things. And so really, young people are the solution. They are the change makers and the leaders of today. And so leaving them out is really a big challenge, but at the same time, incorporating them and using young people would be really the best option to take, because they are the ones that are going to be there tomorrow. They are the ones who are going to be there after very many years, and they are the ones who are going to face these impacts of climate change after those same years. And so empowering them and availing them the necessary resources and support from government, not only government, but also from international organizations, intergovernmental organizations, is the best way to go. And also being able to empower youth councils, come up with youth committees in each and every government organ or in each and every international organization, committees such as this one. Maybe I can give an example, the Youth Sounding Board. We can have such boards whereby young people are able to participate and also being able to be the voices of the voiceless, of their colleagues in the grassroots level. And so it's really important.
That's very true. They are inheritors of what actions we take today. So that makes sense. Now, we are going to come to a little bit of a conclusion, but I want to understand, in your introduction, you mentioned Marafiki. You also mentioned Walton. Is it Walton, Africa? Something like that. You said something around that. What are these sort of, what are those initiatives and what do they do? What do you do there?
Just to be clear again, as the co-founder and one of the directors of Marafiki, United Green Youth Initiative, Uganda, this is mostly an initiative that was started to, first of all, mobilize young people from all over Uganda to get involved in climate action through different programs such as nature and biodiversity conservation, environmental conservation, climate adaptation mechanisms, also capacity building for these young people. And so this initiative really cuts across each and everything, but mostly they are focusing mostly on nature and biodiversity and environmental conservation in a way that we can be able to conserve our environment and to see that we cannot deplete or contribute or depend on mostly the climate sensitive resources. And so we are trying to adapt. That organization is building the capacities of young people to be able to adapt to climate change through initiatives such as tree planting, initiatives such as, let me say, climate education, initiatives such as smart, clean cooking energy, whereby they're able to innovate clean cooking bags, energy saving stoves, etc. And so back to Walton Africa is a startup company that is mainly addressing the impacts of climate change through the management of waste. And that's through the use of the 3 R's, that is reduce, reuse, and recycle. And so we are providing an alternative. So we are providing a circular alternative where we are encouraging people to live in a circular economy, whereby they're able to reuse, reduce, and recycle. We're encouraging people to utilize all the waste, but not to utilize all the waste so that it cannot end up in the landfills. And so we're utilizing this waste. Let me give an example. The food waste, we're utilizing it to make manure and also to be able to make biogas. When we come to the plastics, we're able to use the plastics for making other innovative items such as carpets, or even bags, etc. Or even in other countries, I've seen initiatives where plastics are used for making bricks for building houses. And also, then the textile waste can be used for making products such as bags, shoes, etc., or smart cooking bags. And so we are really putting waste into use, every waste, so that this waste cannot end up in the landfills where they affect the soil or they pollute the soil. So we are also seeing that some of these wastes are really emitting greenhouse gases like methane. Methane gas, you see that when textile decomposes, textile waste, that is the clothes, what extra, they decompose. When they decompose in the absence of oxygen, they will emit methane gas, which is 80 times dangerous than the other greenhouse gases. Methane gas, mainly, it stays in the ozone layer or the atmosphere for more than any other greenhouse gases. And so this is really a problem that people are not looking at. They don't know that when these things are decomposing and they produce the thing, it's really a problem. And also when it comes back to the plastics take over 1,000 years to decompose. They don't decompose actually. They can take over 1,000 years to break down. And so it's really important for us to make sure that we encourage the use of, we don't encourage the use of the reuse. We encourage the reuse of virgin products, such as plastics, so that we can be able to recycle them and also be able to bring back to be able to use them
for different
purposes, and also be able to generate income from some of these products, but mostly also to train young people, empower youth and women to generate income from these activities where they're able to weave or make these products, these innovative products, to be able to sell them and also generate the income. And so some of the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals that we are tackling poverty, we are tackling decent jobs and economic growth. We're also tackling climate change issues, and we're also tackling sustainable development and sustainable growth. So we are really promoting a wide range of sustainable development goals in our communities through empowering these people, but mostly from the grassroots level, empowering these people from the grassroots level to be able to earn a decent amount of income.
To have some level of livelihood. So I think the idea, it begins with reducing, right? You reduce on some of those unsafe products. If you can't reduce, reuse. Make sure that the product you're using is reusable. So if, for example, you're using a material for like courage in sort of a bag, make sure that it can work for at least more than twice or 3 times. So that way you don't have to buy every single time you need to use a bag. Or recycle, so that way the product can be repurposed. So if for example, I met the madam who actually makes bags out of plastics. It was very, very empowering. It was a good, it was a good initiative and a very creative one at that. At the business firm. I also met some gentleman who makes is it mats or something like that out of fiber, and I think it's like a combination of like banana fiber and over some sort of plastic.
Even there are some Indians who are making pads from I
See, so guys are actually finding
Yeah.
very innovative solutions to these things. So for someone who's out there, please, I hope that you take some point and make research. The good thing is this, that knowledge is actually out there. If people are willing to go out and look for this knowledge, they would find ways to even make money out of what would ordinarily be problems. So I hope that you who's watching us from wherever you're joining us from, you're able to take this. So, Mr. Walt, as we conclude, in our parting shots, I want you, in case you have like a message to like government, or it's to the people, young people, particularly our age mates, those in that age bracket, or it's the civil society, private sector, all of these kind of people. What would be your message to to these people in as we conclude, as you also say your parting shots?
First of all, my message to young people is that if you're thinking and if you have an idea and you want to implement it, you need to start now. Stop procrastinating, or stop postponing this idea. If you have an idea, work on it now. Even if you fail, failing is a learning experience. That can be able to give you some sort of experience to make it to make it more better in the future. And so if you have an idea, start now. For the issues of climate change, I'm calling upon each and every young person in Uganda to get involved in climate action, because it is our future that we are talking about. It is our future that we are protecting. It's the future of our children that we are protecting. It's not the future of your grandparents or the old people. It is us who are facing the burden, and it's us that are going to face the burden. It's us that are going to be there tomorrow. And so I'm calling upon each and every young person to take action. It may be small, but it can contribute something. You can do something in your community, plant trees, even just make sure or educate people. It can contribute anything. Everything small can contribute to something. And so for the government of Uganda, I'm really calling upon the government to really prioritize empowering young people through different programs, such as empowering the youth councils, at the district level with this climate knowledge and etc. Youth organizations, but also specifically we have something that is called the Uganda Youth Climate Council. That was started by Green Africa Youth Organization in Uganda. And so really it would be very prudent to have that council supported to implement some of these projects and these plans for young people. And also it will be able to really be prudent to support that council in forms of resources, funds, support, because I'm very aware that even the Ministry of Finance has a climate department. And so it will be really prudent for that department to support some of these initiatives, and also to be able to include and also be able to have youth in their committees, even parliament, the committees at parliament, to be able to, it will really be prudent to work with the young people, but specifically and generally, let us work with the young people and let us involve these young people in all the things that we are doing. And so I think that is the message that I have for now, for each and everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Walter. First, thank you for the time, but also to appreciate, because if you notice, by the way, there are very many youths who are doing a lot of work. But there's even bigger number of youths who actually do not know these things. So first, we commend you for, having the knowledge, taking the initiative to participate, to do something, to be able to contribute to this whole conversation that is existential. Yeah. So we do appreciate that, and thank you so much for your time, and thank you for talking to us. For you who's joining us from wherever you're joining us from, please make it a point to contribute to these conversations. If you have a particular issue and you have an expertise in a particular area, please reach out. We would like to have some of these conversations, and it spreads over and across. We want to understand what are the youth perspectives in many of the common communal issues, if it's climate change, or even if it's governance related, or it's like any expert area. Please reach out. We will see how to have like this conversation. They help in spreading this information, education, again, you hinted about it, to many of our community members, and it helps us make a better community and make a better informed decision. So thank you so much. My name is Roger Suriawe. Thank you so much. I'll see you again next time.